2, 1. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, given we're in the 21st century, I think it's rather ironic and sad that majority of our planet, albeit rich in wildlife and covered in water and have a variety of flora and fauna, in many parts of our world, people still are affected by significant and dire instances of famine and drought. At its base, maybe decades and centuries ago, rich oligarchs and political elites who were privileged by the birth lottery have seized control of resources in the name of capitalism in instances where we didn't have intellectual property or certain rights to be able to protect these things, or in many cases, they've literally plundered or acquired these things from the state or from indigenous communities in the name and heart of capitalism to be able to acquire means of production and enterprise to be able to forward industries. Things like logging operations, things like mining, and things like fishing that is ultimately exploitative in nature of these resources, even if they try to make a profit out of it, even if they employ particular people. Especially in developing nations, right? We see a lot of flora and fauna literally being pushed away from their homes and destroyed in the name of profit, and we think this has to stop. This debate is significantly about three things: resource scarcity and redistribution, food and water security, and the preservation of biodiversity as meant to be able to be enjoyed and consumed by majority of people in society. That is to say, for far too long, this has been a back burner priority, if at all, for private corporations, and we think this policy is ultimate redress and recompense for the state and the government to be able to acquire and reacquire and take away what ultimately is meant to be seen by all of these people. I have a few things to say on opening government. It will constitute our model as well as positive material. Number one, this is a policy debate, meaning we're going to abolish and people cannot own this anymore. Private corporations cannot just seize or buy it. But we recognize that, what happens to those people who already do have it? We think we're going to have a transitionary period wherein the state and government, over a period of time, will be able to buy these kinds of properties back from these corporations. There will be a transitionary period of which this will be amortized over a period of time, 10, 20, 30 years, with a fair market interest rate to be able to fairly buy these things back from the corporations. This is going to be similar to how the government enacts the right to eminent domain when they have to do things like build roads, build bridges in places which were otherwise privately owned. This is going to be similar in status quo to how states manage cultural heritage sites in partnership with indigenous communities and other private enterprises, and even the way it's going to be run is going to be like how they run national parks all over the world. Number two, even if corporations are benevolent and have the capacity to be able to do this, they can very much willing to still partner and have a particular role. For instance, these corporations can be a contractor, these corporations can be a private partner for things like materials or manpower to be able to help the government be able to do this in a fair way. This debate is specifically why we need to be able to abolish them from the get-go being able to own all of that particular shit. We are against private ownership of these things. Thirdly, we think we need to understand that the nuance here is specific to like ecological resources. We're not just talking about like a fucking condominium or a mall complex. We are specifically talking about very rich resources like in the forest, wherein we need to be able to get and study very critical flora and fauna to be able to forward things like medicine and other kinds of technology, and even water, ladies and gentlemen, where in many parts of the developing world and even in the developed world, you have fucking food deserts and people who are literally dying of drought, especially amidst the backdrop of what we're seeing in status quo with rising crazy energy prices and inflation that significantly impede on the ability of the average person to be able to heat their home, to be able to acquire the resources they need to live a good life. That is to say, we think there's a principled push in terms of why the state has to step in and allow these particular people a chance to be able to get these things, and we think the state has every capacity to do that well. Even if these private companies have owned or acquired this legitimately, we think in many instances that was at a time where laws were quite different, meaning it was winner take all. Whoever's able to build here first can take it, just like what we've seen with the men who built America in the United States, wherein the Fords, the Vanderbilts, and all of those particular people, because they were privileged and lucky from the birth lottery, were able to acquire it. But since then, things have significantly changed, which have a call to action for us to really be able to break these things apart and redistribute it to the state as a particular mechanism. We also think in a lot of instances, like in Latin America and Asia and in parts of Africa, these things were literally illegally plundered and stolen from indigenous communities who had no capacity to be able to fight for their own particular right to be able to get that, and we think that the state now has to be able to step in to do so. Why exactly is the state going to be able to do this well? Because like I mentioned in my pre-oration, there's going to be a transitionary period of acquisition to be able to develop these particular things. And moving forward, if these corporations are benevolent, or as I'd suggest, maybe opposition will say, bruh, they had the capacity, they're rich, they can do it. Then if they're that rich, then they'll definitely be able to understand the opportunity cost of that and literally be able to raise capital for other business and enterprise and now partner with the state if they want that altruism. Because we have to understand and examine right now what happens. In many cases, they use it for their own operations, which can only benefit their shareholders and not majority of society. Or in many cases, they don't fucking use it at all. It's just a vacation house of the CEO or like a go-away house of the corporation. And in a lot of cases, these particular rich flora and fauna are not being taken care of or not being touched. On our side of the house, when the state is able to step in, we can actually work with the multiple departments we have, like health and science, to be able to build sanctuaries, to be able to protect these particular things, study them in the name of science, and use our capacity and innovation to be able to redistribute these things to the people who matter. We are very proud to open this debate on side proposition. Thank you.